Here at Be Freaking Awesome, we believe that life is too short to be anything less than extraordinary. Join us as we explore what it means to live authentically, grow continuously, and have a blast while doing it. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I am one of your hosts, Sami Kinnison, here with Angela Belford, and today we are joined by one of my good friends, Jen Porter, and we are going to be talking about dreaming up our 2025s and what does that look like to look ahead, maybe in a little bit less than conventional way. But before we jump into that conversation, Jen, for people who may not know who you are or know what you're all about, why don't you take a moment to tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm so excited to be here. I can't wait to have this conversation with both of you. So, I am a leadership and empowerment coach, and my mission is empowering women to do the most meaningful work of their lives. And so, a lot of that work has to do with helping them get clarity on what is it that you really want and overcoming the fear that shows up and the self doubt that shows up that gets in our way and causes us to fail and not actually fulfill our dreams. So I'm super passionate about empowering women because I think the world needs more empowered women.
I love that. And I love that you start with helping women figure out what they want. I see so often, particularly women, I know men probably experience this, but just thinking about women in mothering roles and wife roles, there's so much of serving other people and taking care of other people's needs that when you then turn to ask that question, what do I want? It sometimes is really hard to answer. They're like, "I don't know. I need to go make dinner and do laundry and finish this to-do list and send this email." It doesn't necessarily matter what I want. And so I think that that's super beautiful that you help tap into that.
It is actually a really hard question for people, and I have to stay present with myself about to be able to answer that question for me. But what do we want? What's important to us? What is our desire? We don't spend time. Usually, women don't spend time thinking about that. We're
Do
like you said, we're always focused on the other.
do you find that it's easier? Do you have to use the strategy, what I don't want, to kind of get people rolling? Is that a common? I'm just
Sometimes it depends on
curious.
the person. So sometimes people will come out and tell me when I ask them that question, they'll tell me what they don't want, or they'll say what they want to avoid.
Mhm.
And so then I'll let them get all that out. And then
Yes.
I'll say, okay, now that we know what you don't want, what do you want?
Mhm.
And you can see it's actually a challenging exercise for those kinds of people that think more about what they don't want as opposed to what we do. But I always have see, I encourage the reframe.
Love it.
I love it. I think room full of coaches right here. We're just going to have such a good fun conversation about and hopefully those of you listening, it's not just listening to us nerd out on how we, vision cast and go forward. You guys are able to listen in and take some nuggets and apply it to your own lives and really make a difference and a change. That's kind of what we're here about.
Well, and I'm excited about the timing of this conversation because here we are, January 14th. And so often, what are the statistics? 80% of New Year's resolutions have gone by January 11th. So we around here often kind of start. I did a few years ago, I did a workshop called Your Dreams Are Calling, and I love doing it after January 11th. Because I'm like, okay, now that you've gotten past the knee jerk 1st of January. So I love that we are starting this conversation with kind of mid January because then sometimes people, I find them go, oh, well, New Year's already passed. Too late. And
Yeah,
it's like,
I was
no, it's
talking to
not.
someone who was like, "Oh, it was just had barely been a couple days into January," and they're like, "I feel like I've already resigned myself. It's February already. Like January's a wash." And it was like, "We are less than 7 days in. This is not a wash yet. Like, let's okay, hold on. We might need to a reframe, take a different perspective, and it's okay that your first 7 days didn't start out exactly how you wanted them."
Yeah. So how
Yes.
do you get people to start dreaming? What are some other techniques?
I typically what I do is I start with reflection. Where have you been?
Mm,
What have you come through? What was the last chapter that you just lived in your life? And at this time of the year, it's usually a year look back, but
Mhm.
that starts to orient the person to where am I in this lifetime journey? And what chapter am I in? How do I name this?
Mhm.
And that starts this conversation of like, do you want more of that? Was that I can tell what lights you up and I can tell what really drains you and how hard that season has been. And so starting from that place, then having that conversation of, okay, what's next? And starting to tap into their own intuition. A lot of this work is about trusting ourselves,
Mm.
That is so
right?
true.
It,
Mhm.
it's because we are looking externally for all these things. It's like, no, let's go inward. Let's look inside and see what wants to be known and seen and said and
Mm.
acknowledged, to then build from that foundation as opposed to grasping for something outside of ourselves for achievement.
And I think that I feel like trusting yourself is one of those things that it could sound like a cliche catchphrase. When you really get into it, it is intimate and messy and gross and beautiful and all of the things that, like, do I actually trust my own heart, my own gut, my own
Mm.
wisdom? And I think that there are times I have noticed I'm at a point in my journey that I can look back really clearly and see, no, I have not trusted myself. And as I now am embracing more of, no, this is good. This is good to rest when I need to rest. This is good to run when I need to run. Even I had in December, I had a week where I was so just like stressed and frazzled with all of the things that December brings, the getting toys for kids, the finishing up work and things that in some ways are hard to avoid even when you're doing all of the great big mental health work and everything. And I was like, I feel like I need to go for a run. I just need to run as fast as I possibly can. And I am not a runner, never been a runner, probably won't ever be a runner. And I was like, I need to run right now. And my husband was like, I don't know what is wrong with you. Like, what is happening? And so I was like, I'm going to the gym. And he's like, we don't even have a gym membership. And I was like, I found a free trial and I'm going to a gym. And I went and I got on a treadmill and I ran as fast as I possibly could because I
Ah.
just, that energy in my body needed to get out, needed to release and just be expelled in such a physical way. And I was like, "What is happening to me right now that I'm running?" And I will acknowledge the journey that a previous version of Sammy would have said, "That's silly. You don't need to like, why would you feel that? Don't go run. It doesn't matter." This version of Sammy is like, "This feels odd that I have this desire. Okay, I'm gonna do it, body. If you say we need to." I'm excited I'll get to a new version that will be like, "Oh, yeah, my body says let's run, so let's go run," and I'll just jump on board, but it's this first couple of steps of trusting myself, of being like, "Okay, you said run. This doesn't make sense to me, but we're gonna go do it," and I felt incredible. The rest of that week, I was like I just felt so much more calm and at ease, and that all of that, like, buzzing stress and just kind of got let out and released. And it was so good. So, yeah, I
And
don't know.
that's it. I find that when it comes to trusting ourselves, we have to start with little things,
Yeah,
small things, that we trust our intuition, we do the thing and see how it turns out.
yeah,
And that's what builds confidence in trusting that voice inside of us. We have to practice it. We have to let it play out and see how it works. And then we can do that with the big things that matter, like the really life changing things that there's a lot at stake. But if we have learned how to trust ourselves, we can lean into that with peace and assurance, even if it's hard, even if we're still uncertain how it's going to turn out. That's
I
hugely important.
I feel like I'm about a half step behind y'all because I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, just trust yourself. And then Sammy's like, look how I learned how to trust myself. And I'm like, hang on, back it up. The bus has got to back up because I had this conversation with a friend of mine who experienced about 5 years ago, experienced a nearly debilitating case of burnout. And then she, took some time. She got a new certification and then was like, that was dumb. I didn't need that. I just needed a break. And then now she's kind of re entered the workforce. And what she is finding is where she used to be able to make herself run, to make herself do the thing, her body and her brain do not trust her at all. There is
Mhm.
no part of her that trusts that it's going to take care of herself. And so she is like in this state of like she feels like forced rest. Like, and she's like, I'm having to kind of lean into it. Almost what you're saying of like, I'm having to lean into this extra rest, resting more than I would think I need because I think I'm building trust again with my body and with my brain because I overrode it for so long and said, I don't care if you're tired, you're gonna finish your PhD. I don't care if you're tired, you're gonna get your Series 7 finance license. Too bad, so sad, we're gonna go. And now it's like, and so she's like, I don't want to end up with a life-changing illness, that makes you shut down. Because I've seen those folks too, where it's like you won't shut down, and then you end up with this a mysterious diagnosis that doctors can't figure out what's wrong with you. Well, what's wrong with you, air quotes, what's wrong with you is that you have ignored your body for so long that it is now in shutdown mode, and it is just needing you to actually rest when you need to rest. And it's just been it's interesting to watch her journey, and then it's a cautionary tale to go like, yeah. And she's like, I don't sense that it's the rest of my life, but I do sense that I need like a 2 to 3 year period of rest. So maybe that is her listening to her intuition and what you're saying of like choosing this whole season of rest right now. But it was fascinating to hear her talk about it as literally, I don't think my body or brain trusts me.
Mm.
That is incredible.
Also,
That's incredible
Angela,
that she put it together.
do
Go
She's
ahead.
you
life coach certified.
Oh.
Her
You
certification
helped
was
her
in life.
contact.
No, no, no. No, no, no. She went through a life coach certification. That's how we met. Is we were getting certified to be a life coach. So I think that kind of helped. She would probably not give it credit, but yes, you're right. Go ahead.
Angela, also, I remember, I don't know if you remember, it's been several years. We had some family vacation that we went on, and then we got back, and you were like, oh, it's the post vacation sickness because my body doesn't trust me to actually rest and take care of itself. So I'll be out for 2 days. And you like said it so chipper while you're like blowing your nose and like in bed or something. It was so interesting where you were like, sorry, having to retrain my body that I actually will give it rest. But you had an interesting period where you acknowledged my I you get sick after almost every trip because that gives you the you rushed really hard on your trip and then you would come home and take several days off. Anyway, it was an interesting conversation. I don't know if you remember that, but
I don't remember it, but I will tell you that this last year I did 17 days in Europe, and the last three, I was going to bed at like 9 o'clock at night.
mhm.
And I didn't care that I was going to bed really early on my vacation, and I was sleeping in. And then I just took a trip to New York, I said I do not want to schedule anything before noon because I want to be able to sleep in, and I want to be able to go as late as I want to go and do what I need. And I know that I cannot do these trips like I used to do, and I rest. And I came back from New York, and I'm telling you, I drove people crazy in December because I came back ready to work, and
She
everybody
really
else
did
is
drive me
on
crazy.
2 week shutdown. They're like, woo, the holidays, I'm done. And I'm like, "Ba, ba, da, ba, da." I got so much stuff done the last 2 weeks of December when everybody else is in shutdown. I really pushed forward, but it is because I did learn to prioritize rest during that trip. And it feels weird because you should get all your money's worth out of it. You should go morning tonight, you know what I mean? And like it's been so nice this year 2020 or this last year 2024 to go, no, I'm coming home better. I'm coming home more
Mm.
refreshed, and I'm ready to pay the vacation tax. I don't know about you guys, but like when you go on vacation, you got to work a lot to get ready to go on vacation, and then when you come back, you got to work a lot. And so I'm like, I need energy to pay the vacation tax.
Oh my goodness. Well, hopefully people can build lives where they don't have to pay so much vacation tax, but Um after reflection, what's next? What's our next sort of phase of this?
Then it's looking forward. It's
Mhm.
starting to dream about what could be next. And it's I find that stepping out of our routine or our normal environment is helpful in us doing this, because otherwise we're just going to keep doing what we've always done. We're so habitual as humans, and we like patterns and we like routines, and we just fall into the default mode. And so stepping to a different location, a
Mhm.
different we're looking at different things, we have different our comforts with us that we can take to a new place, and that's where we can start to do that dreaming of, I wonder where I'll be in a year. What Who will I be around? And so there's a lot of question asking prompts, right? So it's,
Mhm.
who am I seeing? What work am I putting my hands to? What have I accomplished? If it's a year from now, what am I going to look back on as I think across 2025 and say, what happened in this year? What am I most proud of? So it's going into the future and exploring, using your imagination to say, okay, what could this year be like? And it's transporting ourselves in our minds into the future to then see, okay, what do I want to show up? And then it's moving more into the plan. Okay, like, do I really want to do that? Am I going to sign up for that? How do I make this happen? But the dreaming is such an important phase, and really it's letting the soul and the heart and the spirit come to the surface in that exercise, as opposed to just operating from the mind.
I have a question for both of you. What would you say or articulate is the difference between a goal and a dream?
So to me, they're different in essence.
Mhm.
Their very essence is different. Um, they One is more tactical. I actually think that one is something we're taught to do. The goal.
Mm.
Dreaming, I think we're born to do. Now, it might be taught out of us,
Oh, yeah.
because for me, I don't know if I dreamed a whole lot as a child. I don't remember having a lot of dreams. um, even goals. But I taught myself, I entered into the exercise of learning how to dream for my life as an adult. And so I think dreaming is more of, uh, maybe it's like the soul spirit part of us, not just the brain of like, what am I going to accomplish? But dreaming is, it's more imaginative. And then the goal is like, that's it's almost like what you would report to somebody, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I need your goals by Monday morning.
Mhm.
Have them on my desk.
What are the
It's something that we have.
KPIs?
Right. It's something we have to craft to prove our worth so we can keep our job. And so
Yeah.
I think, so I have friends and clients that are have visceral reactions to setting goals. They resist it. They don't want to do it because someone's told them they had to. It's not
Mhm.
been fun. It's not been pleasurable. It's not been exciting.
Interesting.
I have the advantage of having my best friend for many, many years said, I, I'm not a goal setter, like personally. Like if she was in a corporate environment and they had to, set targets and do all of those things. But in terms of personal life, she's like, I'm just not a goal setter. I just don't think like that. She really thought of things in more of like a maintenance sort of way. Like she was like, oh, I'm going to strip my deck and you know, whatever that is. I do
Finish?
it, refinish, yeah, redo my deck every 3 years because that's what you do to maintain it. I'm going to make sure that I get my oil changed. I'm going to actually exercise as a way to maintain my body. I'm going to eat properly as a way to maintain my body. Everything was about maintaining a system or an asset for future value, right? So I'm not
Mm.
going to eat poorly because I know that if I eat poorly today, if I eat a lot of sugar, then tomorrow I'm really cranky and I'm not going to, whatever it is. And so it was very interesting. And we tried to figure out, does that mean that she's just less future minded? And I I hypothesize that no, you're not, because you're actually wanting to maintain things for future value, right? And for me, over the last probably 15 years, I am coming to a place like the other night, somebody said something about SMART goals, and I like had a complete visceral reaction, like you're talking about, and I went completely off. I'm like, do you know that what SMART goals are doing? They're wrecking our brains. Do you know that there's a part of your brain called the habenula that actually logs every single SMART goal that you've ever failed at? And it is what is causing you to be more fearful and not go after the world. Like, no, SMART goals are actually ruining your brain.
I just want everybody to know I'm laughing because this is like the 3rd or 4th time being somebody in Angela's orbit. I get to hear the same rants a lot, and it just makes me giggle each time when it gets a little bit more passionate. Like, screw SMART goals. I'm not doing it. Like, she
Oh,
just
yeah, big
gets
time.
more angry at it
I am
every
getting
time.
more angry. And that's funny is my friend the other night goes, man, you need to do a podcast. I go, oh, I've already done 2 about how terrible SMART goals are. Anyway, my first book in
Fascinating.
2017 said, SMART goals might not be the thing. Let me introduce you to this idea called grand goals. And grand goals are much more about trajectory. It's about how do you want to show up and be in the world. And so that I introduced that concept. My life coach introduced it to me, Kim Hodis, and I've been talking more about that. The last probably 2 years, I have talked about running experiments in my life. And
Mm,
so, what I like to do is I like to say, here's the parameters that I'm going to set for this year. And this is the outcome that I hope to achieve. And let's see how it goes. So, like Sammy mentioned before we started recording, that I spend most of February not in a cold place in the United States. And if you go back to 2021, I ran that experiment and I was gone 10 weeks. And everybody thought my life was magical and amazing. You got to work remotely for 10 whole weeks. And guess what? I almost shriveled up and like into a nothingness because I missed my community. I love being around my people. And it wasn't even just my grandkids because they actually came to visit. My kids and grandkids came to visit me, but I missed my community. I'm like, 10 weeks is too long. And so
mm,
then the next week I did 5 weeks, but I did it. And also Key Largo, Florida was not warm enough. So I then adjusted my experiment and said, I don't want to wear long sleeves. So I kept going south. And then I went and I ran the experiment differently. And I found that Costa Rica was not the answer for me. And then I ran the experiment the next year in Panama, and it was beautiful and amazing. And I wanted to repeat the experiment, and some things came up. So I don't get to repeat that experiment yet, but I'm thinking of goals as experiments because what I've learned about the habenula part of your brain is then my brain is geared up to decide if this works or doesn't work. I don't accomplish something or not accomplish. I'm figuring out if it's actually working for me.
mm,
And so for me, the idea with dreaming is more about vision casting, and it is more about thinking about the totality of your life. I talk about in my book imagining your 90th birthday party and what do you want to be talking about at your 90th birthday party, because most of us will have been retired for a long time, so we're not going to talk about our work by the time we're 90. It's going to be about community, it's going to be about relationships, and I believe you start now to set that vision cast of where you want to be at your 90th birthday party, which it blows most people's brains, and that's okay. And then I back it up, and then I back it up, and then I back it up, and then I go, okay, now let's talk about 2026 you. How are you going to be making progress toward that you want? What experiments are we going to run this year? So anyway, I'm sorry, you set that up for me to go completely off on SMART goals.
I had no idea what I was doing. Wink, wink. No, I'm just kidding. I want to add to my own question though, because we've talked about, what is 1 year from now and kind of looking back. Angela, you sort of teed up
mm,
dreams can be like, what are you thinking about at 90? One of the things for me that has helped when I've been connecting to my dreams is actually going backwards to when I was a
Mhm.
kid. And what are the things that I loved doing as a kid? And I think for some people this works, for some people maybe not. I've tried to convince my husband, I'm like, but what did you love doing as a kid? And he's like, I don't know. I was bad at soccer. I picked flowers on the field. I don't know. Like, anyway,
But what could you lose yourself? I've heard it asked that.
mm,
What could you lose yourself for hours when you were a kid?
mhm.
Because mine was like Play-Doh and Lincoln Logs. And it's no surprise I love building things now. And so
Mm.
it looks a little different. So you might ask him what kinds of toys did he play with
He's gonna
even?
tell me video games. But for me, he's not the point of this podcast. For me, it was writing. That was my thing that, like, I remember I still have the first book I ever wrote, which was in elementary school, and I wrote it about a princess who married a software developer and, which was my dad and my mom. Anyway, it was this super cute thing. I also illustrated this book. It's
Mm.
awful, but it's
It's also
but
a Foreigner
incredible.
song.
Um, but also incredible, like, that I have the first book I ever wrote that was this little fiction story that I wrote as, like, a 2nd or 3rd grader, and
Wow.
I also have lots and lots of pages. I think I probably wrote 100 to 200 page Word doc fiction stories in middle school, junior high that I'm
Wow.
sure are crap, that, like, you look at it now and be like, "Wow, that was" I don't know. The pretty much the thing it had going for it was its length, not necessarily its complex plot. But I this year for 2025, I just decided this is the year I'm gonna start writing my book. Like my real not children's book, but I want to reconnect with that part of me from a kid who wanted to be a New York Times best-selling author. I don't actually care about that metric anymore, particularly because there's just so much that goes into it that if I didn't hit that shiny little blue ribbon, then that's I'm not gonna be upset by that, but I do want a book. I wanna be able to see this
Mm.
is my work. This is something from me and my heart that I created and put into the world. And
Mm.
so it can be looking ahead. How do you want to be remembered? It can be what is your soul desire right now? And it can be what did you crave as a kid? What were those things? You wanted to be a ballerina. Why did you want to be a ballerina? You wanted to be graceful and poised. Are there maybe you're gonna go help with a cotillion or an etiquette. I don't know, whatever it might be, like connecting with those things, even if it can feel far-fetched or silly, that could be a place to start for sure when thinking about your dreams.
I think people don't go there as often as we should because we do think it's silly. Like you even said, your book wasn't good. It was probably fantastic for your age. For
Yeah.
for your maturity at that point is probably amazing. But when we look back, we say these things and we tend to dismiss them as being silly and
Mhm.
childish
Mhm.
instead of seeing how it was the groundwork that was laid for how we came to be in this place
Mhm.
now. And I can see all of that being preparation, looking back to see how was I prepared for what I'm going to do next? Because
Mhm.
that's we're able to take all those things. You're able to take the book that you wrote
Mhm.
I say, well, I'm actually a writer. Like I've always been a writer. This has always been part of me. And in fact, I've done it before. Now it might
Mhm.
not be to the scale, right? Or the sophistication, but it was preparation. And that's the strong foundation for us to stand on now to take other risks.
I want to tee up an idea of what, when we think about people not being able to dream and feeling like that, looking back at what you did as a child was silly. Do you think there's an element to where people think about this? Oh, I'm planning my life, and therefore I'm thinking about a year from now. I should connect that to how I make money. Do you
Mm.
think that might keep people from dreaming and connecting to what they really want? Have you seen that? Does that
It
factor in?
absolutely does. It absolutely does. I think there's other reasons though. My first thought of what keeps people from dreaming is trauma. I mean, there's just people
Mm,
have gone through some stuff, and
mhm,
life has sort of proven to them that it ain't gonna work. Like this is not gonna
mm.
happen. Don't even try to dream because
Oh,
we have such deep
so good.
disappointments in our lives, and so we have to shed some of that in order to come alive again or for the
Mhm,
first time to really dream. But your point is about the connection between dreaming and monetization, and people get very stuck in that. I mean, people
yeah.
come to me with their ideas, and it's often it sounds like, I mean, I'll say, okay, what are your thoughts about what you'd like to do next? You're not happy with where you are. You don't want to stay in this place, but you do want to do something else. What are you thinking about? right? I kind of like tease it up like this, like, what's your crazy idea? And they'll say, oh, it's silly. And then they'll tell me this fabulous concept that I'm like, you should absolutely do this.
Yes.
But that's what happens is people get stuck in the how. How in the world is
Mm.
this going to work? And so we shut it down, right? We shut it down before it even gets started because we can't add up in our heads, how could this play out and work for me in order to fund the life that I want to have?
I love
Mm.
that so much.
I I did this once at a networking event with someone where
Yeah.
we were chatting and I was like, "Tell me about what you do, Victor." And he was like, "Oh, I'm a master's student." And I was like, "Oh, what are you going to do after you finish your master's program?" And he's like, "Get a job." And I was like, "Sure. Okay. Of course you're going to get a job, Victor." I was like, "You don't know me from Joe Schmo over there. What are you dreaming of? Like, what do you hope to do? What are your biggest dreams?" And it was such an interesting moment where I basically was like, "You could be crazy vulnerable with me right now because I'm a complete stranger. What am I going to do with this?" And he opened up and shared with me like the deep desires of his heart, and then we became, like, instant friends, we're no longer strangers, and I had never thought about teeing that up at a networking event with somebody before. I definitely wouldn't recommend it as, like, your number 1 go-to strategy. I would use it as, like, an energetic feel the moment, and there are gonna be some people that you could, like it's all I think about, I'm a big Star Wars nerd, and there was one single path for Luke to shoot the blaster through to blow up the Death Star. And sometimes you can just see it and you'd be like, oh, I know how to get right to the heart of this, like way past all of your defenses and everything. And I'm just going to blow up your world a little bit in the best way. Sometimes it doesn't work, but it was interesting how I was able to just come in as a total stranger and help lift out these these big dreams of them. I think that also illustrates it is really helpful to do this with someone, not just on your own.
And it's very vulnerable work.
It
It is.
is.
Like,
Yeah.
that's why you wouldn't ask someone that question right off the bat. Like, what's your dream? No one's going to tell you.
Right.
Mhm.
They're not going to tell you. I mean, maybe some small percentage will, but it's
This
that
one guy.
you're building trust. But the thing that you did, Sammy, is you built trust with him in that split second moment of like
Mhm.
you invited him, and he caught the invitation and he leaned into you.
Mm.
Mhm.
And that's why
Yeah.
he opened up. He wouldn't have done that if everybody else had asked him that same question. It's very vulnerable to talk about our dreams.
Well, and I think that when you say do it with someone else, I think you have to be cautious about who you do it with, who you dream with. I should say it like that, because dreaming with a total stranger is actually a low risk. I- You know what I
Mm.
mean? But when you share your dreams with your closest friends or your family members, and they, in their effort to try to protect you, and they want the very best for you, and sometimes because 'cause they're curmudgeon jerks, but mostly because they wanna protect you from disappointment, because 'cause they're afraid of disappointment, because they have their own unresolved trauma. You share a dream with them, you share a business idea with them, you share a, like, "I think I wanna write a book" with them, and they're just wanting to give you information to they squash it, but I think they squash it often with good intention, not because they don't believe in you, but actually because they're afraid for you. They don't want and they're gonna be like, "If you fail, I'm gonna be the one picking up pieces. I'm gonna be the one that is gonna be stuck with you crying and whining and listening to you tell me about how it didn't work out. Oh, this means you're gonna ask me for money." I mean, there's all
Mm.
sorts of ways that there are people in the world that I'm like, "Yes, of course you can do this." And then if one of my children said they were gonna do that, I would be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to open up my basement to them." When it doesn't
It's
work out.
interesting, Angela, because what you're highlighting is so true. This played out in my life. It plays out in most people's lives. You're highlighting the fear. There's a
Mhm.
fear that's causing someone to react the way they are,
Yep,
and it's because they are wedded to the outcomes of your decisions.
yep.
The way the person hears it is they don't think I have what it takes.
Yes. 1000% yes.
And so then we're
Agree.
deflated. It's not just, oh, this person doesn't think I can do this. It's, I don't have what it takes to do this. This is a silly idea. This is crazy. And I'm not ever going to share it with anybody else.
Yeah.
And well, here's why I think that why I think dreaming is so important and experimenting with our
Mhm.
dreams is because other people need to see it.
Yes.
We can't take anybody where we haven't gone.
Mhm.
And so, why can I believe in people's dreams when they tell me? It's because I've pursued my dreams, I've taken risks. And so I can believe with them that it's going to happen and like we can figure this path out. We can find this path together.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Angela.
Oh, I just want to just brief comment on, especially when you're sharing your dreams with your parents. If your parents, you might test them with a small piece of your dream, but specifically, I think that as parents, in addition to the protectiveness, there's, and especially across cultures, who my child is a reflection of me. And so if my kid's a doctor, my kid's a lawyer, my kid's a whatever, then that means something about me. So I just want to caution people that sometimes, in addition to their own fear, it could also, they're making it mean something about me. My kid got a divorce, my kid got a whatever. And it's very difficult as a parent to disconnect that and not make it mean something about yourself. And so just be aware of that. We want our parents to be our most supportive partners. We want them to be in our cheering squad. Just be cautious about that. And that's when I think a life coach can be super helpful, because you can work through a lot of those things and they can poke holes in your theory to try to make you stronger and better, try to help you identify the obstacles, and it doesn't mean anything about the life coach.
Mm. I
That's
think that's
exactly
really
what
good.
happened in my life. It was my dream. So I there were a couple of times, big moments in my life where I went to um, my parents with dreams and they shut them down out of
Mm.
protection. Exactly what you're saying. And when I had gone through a divorce, life was changing dramatically, and I was making some decisions that looked unhinged, but they were actually rooted in trusting myself and trusting the
Mm,
wisdom within me. But not everybody could see that because they hadn't had that same experience. I reached out to a life coach because I needed somebody to challenge my thinking. I
mhm,
wanted that rigor of clarity and next steps. And is this legitimate? Am I crazy? And I knew that she was objective. And so she was able to help me move forward and explore those things. And I was able to name, Sammy, to your point of that childhood, I was able to name for the first time to someone else this childhood dream that I had carried that I hadn't even thought of. But and when she brought it out of me, then she asked more curious questions about it. What do you see? Who's there? What are you doing? And it felt, it was so vulnerable because to say it out loud, it sounded silly to me, but it wasn't, and it ended up being that changed the course of my life, to
Mm.
name those dreams and follow it. So I needed that help from a coach.
I would say, besides a coach, the other thing I would encourage people is community, because, and this is specifically applicable because of how you two are friends, um but having joined a community. But if you don't have anyone in your life, in addition to a life coach, go find other people who aren't afraid of your dreams. Like, we jokingly tell the story because I World Domination Summit went on for it was a conference that went on for 10 years, and I would go to it and I would be like, "Oh, here's my big dream." And everybody there had such giant dreams that I felt like I had this tiny little dream. It's like the
Mhm.
joke of, like, when you go to the beach, at least take a bucket, because the kids are going to laugh at you. Just take a spoon to get water out of the ocean, like go and find places where your dream feels small to the people around you, because then it will help grow you. It will help make it feel like your dream is not so silly. And sometimes that is, I've had to go to conferences, I've had to go to workshops, I may have had to join coach programs where there was community in that, but I just, it may not, for a long time, I didn't find it in my own hometown. I think as I got stronger and healthier, then I was able to find it locally. How has community impacted your kind of journey, Jen?
It's been a part of it every step of the way. And those communities have looked different every step. So, I found myself in the last maybe year specifically of wanting to connect with other women who were being audacious in their lives, that were um, pushing past the fears, and that were dreaming really big. And that's why I connected with the growth group that Sammy and I are in. I wanted to be surrounded by other women who are doing the thing, like they're doing it. and
Mhm.
and I knew I can't do it. I can't do it alone. I don't want to, number one, but I can't. Sort of proven to myself that I'm not going to be able to get to the levels of impact that I want to have in this world without locking arms with others, mostly women, but men too, who are, sort of on the same path, on a similar, at least similar path.
I think a lot about I'd say in my head it says the Brene Brown quote, but it's not. It's the Theodore Roosevelt quote about the man in the arena that Brene Brown so loves as well. That it's not the critic who counts, but it's the man who's in the arena whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, and even if he fails, at least knows the great triumph of daring greatly. There are times where when I struggle and I tell somebody who is a critic outside the arena, they're like, "Well, of course you struggle. You're dreaming too big. Your goals are wrong and blah blah blah." And that is super discouraging and it's really hard. And not only am I fighting the voices in my head, but now their voices as well, and all of these obstacles. Whereas if I can say, man, this thing is really hard, and you look to somebody else who's like, oh, yeah, I was just knocked down there last week or whatever it is, I've been where you are. Yes, that's hard. Here's how I got through it. Or, hey, let's go through it together, whatever that might be. It's such a
Mhm.
different experience than somebody who says, well, the whole pursuit is the problem, not just the problem you're facing today. And that's what I love about being in this just bigger community is that I want people who are not afraid to chase big impact and meaning and purpose in life. And I don't want to sound judgy. And
Mhm.
Angela, when I think about your friend who's like, I'm in maintenance mode, I'm like, oof, what a small impact. And
Yes.
I
Mhm.
don't I don't want to think that way because I also know that impacting one person one day at a time matters. And I don't know, there's something in my heart that just craves more, and I'm gonna let that be. And if your heart doesn't crave more, I don't know that that's a problem. I don't think that that's something wrong with you. I think that's different
Mm-mm.
people and different seasons. And if you're listening to this podcast and you think we're, diminishing that idea, we're just a
Mm-mm.
different bad control group for you. You can find
For
more control
sure.
groups.
Because that friend also does a really fantastic job of, I just heard somebody died and she's got a pot of soup ready to take to them next day. She's calling people, she's baking cookies for people that are like, she's loving well the people
Mhm.
because she knows how to maintain relationships as well. Right? It's not just maintaining herself, but for her, those relationships matter. And so she is contributing to her community in just a very different way. One time I asked, same friend, I asked her, I said, do I have a big ego? And she said, yes. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she said, thank goodness you do.
Mm.
Angela, you are changing the world and you are going to change the world. And it takes a big ego to say, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to change people's lives. And we need people like you. Not everybody needs to be like me. We need people like you. And I was just like, because I was like, and she goes, you have to.
Mhm.
And I
That's
mean it in that. And I'm
beautiful.
like, okay. So that's it.
What
Also, you have to be careful about what you ask your community
So
too.
good. What's coming to mind, Sammy, when we think about community is this a thought that I haven't, it's a new thought. When we are operating alone, pursuing our dreams, we are often comparing ourselves to others because we're looking for those that have already done it. And we see where that's happening on social media, right? That's the lens in which we're able to see who else is doing this. And then we see their best days,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
so if we're in it alone, we're going to compare ourselves against a false narrative,
Mhm.
and we're going to
Yeah.
feel like a failure every day
Or even if
because
it's
we
not a
haven't gotten
false narrative, it's an incomplete picture at
an incomplete
best.
picture. That's a better way
Yeah.
to say it. And so to be in a community of like-minded, like-hearted people where we're in the grind of it together, we are able to lift each other up on our hard days, and we're able to learn from those that have gone before us or have just experienced something that we haven't experienced yet to get help and support. And so you see behind the scenes,
Mm.
like, oh girl, yeah, I get it. Let me
Yeah.
tell you how I handled this, or I see you, just to be seen and say, you're going to get through today. You've got this. Keep going. You're so
Yeah.
close. Keep going and check in with me. I've got your back. I celebrate you. All of that stuff happens, and that happens offline.
It
Mhm.
does. In our monthly, weekly groups that we've had, I've shown up and I've cried multiple times and then feel like I'll cry one time. And then the next time I'll be like, I'm on top of the world. And then the next time I'm crying again. And having people who are there and accept you and see you through all of that is super beautiful. Jen, any last thoughts for people as they think about dreaming in 2025? Any wisdom or encouragement you want to leave people with?
So, dreaming for 2025, I think that we don't dream big enough. And it takes time, I would suggest set aside time to ask yourself the questions. Gather a group of people around you. It doesn't have to be big, but just gather a group and do some of this reflection and dreaming and planning together, because we are a mirror for one another.
Mm.
And so we need other people to show us what's inside us and what they see, because our superpowers are not always, we're not aware of our superpowers. We just do the thing and we think that it's just normal. It's not normal. It's fantastic. And the world can benefit from what it is that we could bring. So connecting our desires with what we're really good at and what our zone of genius is, and get that feedback from others around us as we do the dreaming and planning, so that we're not doing it alone and getting off course. Then that same community can help throughout the year stay connected and stay super focused to what it is we want to do.
Mm, that's so good. Jen, if people want to connect with you more, they want to talk with you about the coaching you offer, or even just see more of what you're putting out into the world, where can they find you?
So my website, which is discovertrueself.com, discovertrueself.com. And then LinkedIn is where I hang out most. And so you'll see some of this lioness branding that's coming out, and a new website is going to be launched really soon in the next couple of weeks. So that's going to be inviting women who want to make bold moves into a community to be able to do that work together. It's called Lioness Rise Up. The other thing that I'll share with your audience is I have an exercise that I can share that guides people through this reflection and dreaming and planning for the year. It's a perfect time of the year to do this. So if you'd like, I could share that with you, and you could share that with your audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. Get a good way to sign
Okay.
up for that. And get that information. Thank you so much, Jen, for being a part of this conversation. I think this was lovely, and hopefully all of you guys can get something about it to prime your conversations. Even though it's past air quotes New Year's resolution time, it's still never a bad day to think about where you're going and how you want to get there. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope that you guys go subscribe to our email newsletter. You can go to our website, befreakingawesome.com, the letter B, freakingawesome.com. And until next time, we hope you guys go be freaking awesome.